Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Empowered Teams podcast. I am Eric.
And I'm Toby, and the subject of today's podcast is talking about flow, immersion, and presence in video games. In particular, we're interested in, I suppose, what makes great video game experiences, what are the characteristics behind this, and what when we look at video games and when we're building video games is, in a sense, I think, Eric, though it's not often used in the video game world, is the pedagogy of the design.
Yeah, I think there's this notion that video games as sort of virtual experiences have an uncanny ability to get you to enter a virtual space and sort of be present there, right? And we're going to sort of go through the details of that, how it works, what are the key systems behind that, right? How do they get those systems to function, and how we can use them to create interesting immersive experiences.
Well, yeah, I think there's that. I think it's like also getting to grips with the vocab,
Yeah,
as well. So when we start talking about game design,
yep,
for many people who are not professionals in this industry, there's a misunderstanding about the psychology or the social psychology as well behind great game design. There's also a misunderstanding, I think, from non-game players primarily, that these are learning environments, both at a team level, at a leadership level, at an individual level, and that these characteristics of immersion, flow, and presence are what combine together to make great experiences.
yeah. I think there's this thing where as a gamer or as someone playing a video game, you tend to sort of consume the media without having to think about it too much, without having to understand how it functions. And often in discussions, when we sort of have chats about games, you see that lots of people don't really recognize and don't really concentrate on what's happening under the hood, and on what creates a good game, what creates a bad game, what creates an interesting game or an uninteresting game. And so of course we create video games for professional training, right? But also just in a more general sense, as people who are trying to understand more about the role of gaming in our culture, the presence of gaming in our culture, and sort of how we can use games to do more than just entertainment. It's very important for us to recognize, understand, and sort of concentrate on these systems to bring them into the
So,
discourse and be able to share more effectively.
I think one of the things we've missed in the introduction is in the background there's an article that we wrote
Yeah.
on Medium. For those who are listening to the podcast, you can find it in the introduction, etc. Wherever you find this, it's linked. So I think one of the reasons we wanted to talk about this was because it's getting or educating the learning and development community, and as well as individuals around these three concepts as ways to develop content that can improve team leadership performance behaviors.
Yeah.
Here we've got the metaverse being the sort of pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, this immersive pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And people are focused on the technologies. The idea of 3D internet is going to change everything. As a principle, probably yes, it is. But the thing that makes the change is the content and the experience of that content. And these three aspects, immersion, flow, and presence, are the characteristics that drive that.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the interesting ways we can look at this is, if you're trying to craft an experience to teach something. And this is, we're not just talking games here, any type of experience, right? If you take it out of the context of games and go to, like, we were talking last episode about board games, but you have the classic team building experiences that involve real life stuff, like, I don't know, throwing hatchets at targets on a wall, running through obstacle courses, any type of experience that you're trying to use to create some sort of either learning or an environment that's conducive to a certain type of social behavior, anything like that. Crafting that experience or understanding how that experience is crafted is, you were talking about vocabulary. It is learning the language that will allow you to use it more effectively, right? If you're going to be looking for an experience to solve a specific issue, understanding the words that qualify the experience's quality level, its effectiveness, is the first requirement. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to communicate with the person who either built that experience or is trying to offer it to you. So, in a certain sense, we're giving you the keys to understanding what experiences can do to teach and to transmit knowledge or skills, specifically skills.
Yeah, because I think what we're trying to do is to help organizations and people who are incrementally trying to leverage LMS systems through their content to make impactful learning. Only in reality, they'll be forever stuck in the workflows, because you can only do so much with videos and questionnaires without actual action. All right. And these are, no matter how much you try, passive systems of learning, of which it's very difficult to say that the learning effects stay present with the participants afterwards. So if we focus on, because in many ways, flow presence and immersion is what happens in sport as well, right? So here, flow, when we talk about it, there's now, if you just come down a bit there, it is, here you can see, like, it's about when you enter a space, right, in your mind that's between the thoughts, between the words. I know that sounds a bit zen and all the rest of it, but it's not. It's what's called being in the zone in sport, right? So that means you're not being captured by the eternal chatter of the mind that's primarily negative, that says you can't do this, what happens about this, it's going to make you frightened, right? There's like this harmony comes over you. And what seemed difficult still remains difficult. It's just that your skills match it now. All right? And flow is you guys can look it up, is characterized as being in a timeless state, like time slows down and the object of your focus and the solution that you're delivering just seems easy.
I think,
right?
A good way to think about this, and this is mostly based on anecdotal evidence, the way I've experienced flow in some cases. But there's this thing where, as you're going through an experience, as you're either learning something or trying to do something, often you get this point where you're starting to master the system, right? Imagine sort of a repetitive task that has a level of mastery. I don't know, making pottery, anything like that. At a certain point, you start to get pretty good at it. And you still have to concentrate really hard on what you're doing, right? You're still trying to make sure that you're doing it right. Flow is the moment where you forget about that and you just do it. And typically flow is characterized by, the way flow is often described is when you reach a certain level of mastery. So you're actually not thinking about it and doing it better as a result, because you're letting your mind sort of, flow, right? You're letting your mind just take care of things, take control of things in the background while your thoughts are sort of clear and not concentrated. You were talking about the timelessness. I think one of the things is, I think it's a pretty well documented way our brain works, though I'm not an expert on this for sure. When we concentrate on stuff, when we're actively thinking about something, time slows down because we're trying to create short-term memory, right? Whereas when we sort of don't think about things, time becomes this vague notion. We forget time. We don't, you might not remember what happened during the last 2 minutes if you're not concentrating on stuff. So to an extent, in a state of flow, there is no distinction between what happened 10 seconds ago and what happened 2 minutes ago. You're sort of just letting things happen at their own rhythm. And you really lose track of time. And this has happened to everyone, probably for very different reasons in very different contexts. It can be doing a sport, it can be doing a physical activity, it could be working on Excel spreadsheets for all I know, right? And what's important to understand is that this state, for many types of video games and many types of experiences, that's what they're trying to get you to, right? That's the end goal, is getting you in a state of flow.
I think because state of, your mind is not fettered by negative thoughts, all right? It's not held back. And so flow is what top sportsmen describe when the audience are watching them saying, you just made that look easy.
Yeah.
And the person turns around, no, but it took me 30 years to get there.
Yeah.
Right? Okay? Right? So that and in flow, it doesn't really matter what it's doing, but in a sense, it's a kind of creativity. Right? That's what's taking place there.
Well,
I think
to latch onto what you're saying about negative emotions and negative thoughts, if you go back to that pottery example, just to keep the metaphor going, when you're very conscious of what you're doing, any mistake will immediately get you off your game. You'll make a mistake and your mind will latch onto it and you won't be able to think about anything else. So
I'm not
thing.
sure. No, I'm not sure. I think that's interesting. I think what happens in a state of flow is even if you do make a mistake, you don't get trapped by it.
So that's it. Once you enter a flow, that no longer happens because that mistake is just part of the flow. It's just part of the process. And so, if we're talking about learning something, that ability to set aside flaws and mistakes and continue just doing and progressing and learning is a key component of creating an experience conducive to progressing and continuing forward and learning new things and trying new things. You have to stop yourself from being held back by fear, doubt, and all those things.
Yeah, doubt and uncertainty, the three killers of performance. Yeah, if you come down a bit then in the article, what we've got then is what we talk about is immersion, right? And you hear this used a lot in learning and dev and learning and development organizations, etc. But it's like, yeah, it's immersive, so therefore it's VR. It's not. Somehow this word's being captured and used as a VR thing, when actually it's characteristic of all 3D technologies. Because it doesn't really matter whether you're wearing a headset or you're looking at a 2D screen, right? You're immersed. You are, we're about to see that in our three words that we're using, which is flow, immersion, and presence, that they're not distinct categories, that they blend into each other.
They're components of one whole. Yeah.
Experience. Yeah.
I think one of the ways I like to describe try to get people to understand what we mean by immersion is to immediately create a distinction between technical immersion and sort of the more sort of mental side of immersion. Technical immersion is about a media's ability to replace your natural senses by virtual senses, right? So if you take the extreme, which is, currently it's VR technology, it's replacing your eyesight, it's replacing your hearing. In certain cases, it's even replacing your sense of touch for some things, right? And if
Even
you take the,
that,
sort of almost the opposite, you could have reading, which is not replacing any of your senses. But the thing is, reading can still be immersive. With your mind, can project itself into a story. It can create
right,
images.
but so what we're talking about there, which is the way that I do, is that immersion, because I like the link to the book, is a suspension of disbelief.
Yep.
Right. So, and where was this first really written about? Is it actually is reading books? When you're on a holiday and you get a great book, and you enter into a state of flow because you're with the characters. Yeah, your world of imagination. You are in this book. You are present in this book.
Yep.
And you've suspended disbelief. And in the same way that you have that, whether it's in a book or in a film at the cinema, etc., we have this in video game. It's the same. The content has the same magic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think one of the really important things to understand about immersion and the sort of why we think immersion is important. Immersion is the thing that's going to take you out of, but through that suspension of disbelief, it's going to take you out of the normal world and into the world of the experience you're trying to go through, be it a book, a game, a movie, anything. And once you're in that world, you can then follow the rules and systems of the world, right? Because you're immersed in it, because you to a certain extent believe in it, then it's able to give you rules and systems and settings, and you'll just follow them and work things out that way. So if you're trying to create an experience where you ask people to project themselves in something and learn from actions that are within that context, well, they have to be able to project themselves. They have to be able to let go of reality and enter that world, accept it for what it is in order to go through
Yeah.
the experience.
I was thinking that of the great child psychologist Piaget, where he talked about the role of games, right, and human development, child development. And I think one thing that he was talking about in games was it teaches you rules. You use these rules to negotiate
Mm-hmm.
what's happening around you, to make sense of the world. And in many ways, what happens when you play games is the first thing you're looking for is the rules.
Yeah.
All right. And collectively, together, what are the rules? And most people don't realize, one, that they're doing that, or two, that they should be doing that in some cases, And so that finding the rules, unlocking these rules, right, makes the experience, the immersive experience, all right, work as you're overcoming the challenges. You're entering a state of flow. That flow is a positive experience. It's actually why you come back.
Yep.
To play to why you go back and play great games again and again, or great experiences. Why games like World of Warcraft have continued for 14 years plus. Why Overwatch is a great multiplayer, despite all the negativity it's sometimes received, going from 6 players to 5 players and so on. It's why people come back to play it. League of Legends is an absolute unbelievable example of that. If we scroll down, Eric,
Yeah.
on the article,
Absolutely.
then, because I have it here as well, is that we then come with our third category, which is presence. I always like to think of presence as, because there's a lot written on presence, a lot of research done on presence in video games. But it's one of those things that for the non-playing community is they think that you're just using keyboard and mouse or controller, and that there's a divorce between your body and mind and the game that you're in,
Mhm.
right? But I'd say, you first experienced this when I was playing World of Warcraft and you jump off a cliff, right? And actually, you're sitting in your chair, you jump off the cliff, your stomach goes. So no differently than if you were experiencing that in the real world. Obviously, when you jump off the cliff in the real world, there's a splat at the end of it, but actually, you have your character's configured with a fail safety, so it doesn't splat at the end of it unless you've done it wrong. But you physically experience the height, all right, and the sense of falling as your character falls.
Yeah,
This is presence.
I think there are a few.
Equally, this. Sorry, go on.
I think there are a few examples we can give that sort of put this in people's minds. One of the things you see is often, especially people who aren't used to video games and haven't sort of built the muscle memory yet. If you put a controller in their hand and you put them in control of a character, it is a classic sort of trope, right? That you'll see people tilt their whole body when their character is turning. Not the, not even the controller, their whole body. And then once
No, but
they
it's
get into it,
no,
the controller tilts, and after a while you don't do it anymore
no, but no.
because you've
Do you
trained
remember
muscle memory.
we were working with a colleague and we were training human resource director. Do you remember one of our colleagues
Yeah.
he prefers car sports games,
Yep.
but he was playing a multiplayer and an RPG. He didn't just turn; he turned his chair
Yeah.
to go left, turned to go right.
Yeah.
Do you remember?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So the presence, the connection between your physical body and your mind and the way that you're thinking was actually in the character that you're driving, so to speak. You are inhabiting that universe on the screen.
Yeah.
That's presence.
And to be
You know.
clear, it is not black magic or anything. It's actually relatively simple in the way it functions. The way I see it, presence is almost a result of combining flow and immersion, right? Since you're immersed, you believe, to a certain extent. Of course, we always have, not understanding that it isn't reality, but you believe the world and you're able to accept it for what it is. And since you're in a state of flow, you're not, analyzing it and decrypting it. You're just letting it be and getting into the experience very loosely, right? And that puts you in a state where presence becomes possible, where the game is able to communicate senses beyond the ones it's giving you. So even if it's just sight and maybe a bit of touch and maybe hearing, you will still get shivers and you will still sort of have almost not a sensation of pain or anything, but your mind will react as if there was a sensation of pain or a sensation of pleasure or a sensation, all these things. And when that becomes really important is if you're trying to get people to experience something, if you're trying to get people to feel a situation in a way that's close to reality, for it to have proper meaning, for it to have an impact, for it to have long-lasting consequences, that presence is going to be 1,000 times more effective than a similar experience without any sense of presence.
Well, I think you're bang on there. I think the other thing is that, here we're talking about the design of games, all right, that can accelerate learning,
Yeah.
all right, okay, through these three things, all right. When we talk about what are we countering, well, to our absolute surprise, we bump into people solution providers in the business world that still deliver training via tabletop games and role plays.
Yeah.
And somehow what they don't understand is that, one, that type of training is so out of kilter with Gen Z experiences. The PowerPoint, even if it is in Zoom calls or Google Meet or whatever, right? You're actually de-accelerating the learning experience. Nobody remembers it. Everybody that turns up is sort of, switching on to neutral.
Yeah.
They're actually present, but not present in
Yeah.
what's going on. So here, when we talk about these three characteristics, all right, if you bring them, if you make them part of your design process, then you're going to create environments that accelerate learning.
Yeah.
Particularly if you're making content that's not just one-off, that's repeatable content. Repeatable means that you've got dynamic content within the video game that changes. You haven't just created a workflow that's a tick in the box, And in doing this, what you're hoping to experience is each time that you do a playthrough, a new way of learning. That sounds like crazy for many people who create workflows and LMS systems, because their way of measuring whether somebody should go through it again will be whether they passed, failed, 70%, 80% here. We're not talking about those experiences like that, because the way that we in flow immersions and presence, and particularly not just in the way we design video games, but actually the whole pedagogical narrative for designing is based on forward failure.
Yeah.
Though most people in the games world don't call it that, but that actually is the key principle of how they learn. That they fail, they get back up, they try again, they fail, iterate, get back up, try again, whether it's a team or not. And the key component within flow immersions and presence that's driving or accelerating the learning is that you are really changing the inner game to make the outer game work.
Yeah.
You're focusing on the soft skills, on the power skills, on your self-awareness and self-control, so it becomes skilled awareness with you and your team.
I think one last point to make, you're talking about designing here and creating these experiences. I think it's important to note that there are actual techniques and tools and systems that are well documented in the video game space, specifically for crafting experiences that enable this. For anyone interested, you can go and look at videos online about game design, and you'll see very interesting systems being put in place, minute details that you can change, a screen shaking a bit after an action, the color of something, the amount of time it takes between an action and a reaction on screen. There are ways of creating experiences that promote these systems of presence, flow, and immersion. And so our job as designers is to create something that will, even if someone doesn't come in with the right mindset, even if someone has a hard time with this type of experience, even if someone is not used to video games, they will still get sort of pulled into the experience. And it will allow us as coaches, as trainers, to push them into the right mindset, into the right posture to be able to learn more effectively. And this is not unique to video game technologies. It is just that video game technologies are extremely well suited to creating this sort of ecosystem, I would almost say, right? So we're really talking about something that is building better training environments by using tools specific to virtual spaces, if that makes sense.
Well, I think it does actually, but if we also then put it into context, all right? So we now know that post-COVID that being able to manage virtual technologies from your mobile phone to your PC or wherever it is you're coming in is a key component of your professional life, and that it isn't going to stay as it is, but it's growing exponentially in terms of the type of disruptions that these technologies are bringing. So when we talk about IQ, rational intelligence, when we talk about EQ, here within EQ, we talk about the ability to be agile, to adapt, right, through the development of self-awareness and the control of your emotions. Here, what we're talking about within that context is immersive intelligence. And what we mean by immersive intelligence is the ability for content designers to use these three principles to create environments where people can learn, but it's also within those environments, which are not just within the game, but outside of the game, is they teach you to be able to navigate the virtual technologies that are around you. So you don't just play the game and okay, that's it. You're actually coming out. So I always make the crass analogy with Google Live on Maps.
Mm-hmm.
And I ask many executives, time after time, say, you guys go use Google Maps? Yeah. Do you use Google Live? And they go, what's that? Well, actually, it's the superimposition of where you can hold your mobile up. It reads what's happening around you in terms of shop signs and stuff. And it tells you where to go,
Yeah.
which is almost exactly the same construction of experiences within a video game. Only here it's augmented reality. But if you don't have that experience, one, to look for it, two, you've done it elsewhere, it never happens.
Yeah.
You don't experience it. Other people are driving it. That's immersive intelligence, in the sense that we're mapping intelligence to having real world results.
Yeah.
Here, rational intelligence is theoretical. It's about passing exams with knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Here, what we're talking about is action orientated, action learning, tangible results that come from what you do. It's the whole thing on action learning and learning by doing here.
Yeah, and I think in general this is the sort of thing that people should start taking more interest in across the board, not just people who are interested in designing this sort of content or coaches who might be interested in using it, but also, in general, as you were saying, it gives you the ability to better understand new technologies. It gives you this sort of more flexible mindset across the board. It's going to become a necessary skill. It already is in many fields, and this is only an accelerating phenomenon. So,
well, when we're going to finish up soon, but when you look at different industries like the healthcare industry,
mm-hmm.
just because it has real pragmatic need for simulations, they're preferable to getting it wrong with real world patients.
Oh, yeah.
It's the same for military applications, all right, where you're training teams to function and really, really, really stressful and pressure-based environments. And when we talk about first responders here, the British way to say is, the blue light services, which are ambulance, police and fire. Here, simulations are extraordinarily important, not just because people think, oh, well, they're just repeating processes and getting it right. Absolutely not. Within the training environments required for each of those environments, the reason you're training is for the unpredictable. All right? That's what you're training for, to deal with the unknown unknowns. So here, when you're talking about training, a video game is not separate from the reality that you experience. It's an extension of it. And I think that's what we're trying to say when we talk about immersion, flow, and presence, is these are the same characteristics that great designing content does, but the world we're living in right now is virtual content coming in different ways. The aspiration of the metaverse is it's 3D internet, and we're not there yet. But a lot of the components that we're experiencing are there.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily mean that we're going to run around with VR glasses that we see now, but certainly there are devices being, we saw Google Lens and we saw Google Glasses as part of this experiment, but it's not there, where you will be present in a virtual augmented reality permanently.
Yeah.
Even in
I think
Sweden.
a good way to think about this is we already have made a shift to using technology as an extension of ourselves and as an extension of our mindset, right? Everyone sort of, the let me Google that kind of thing, right? When you're talking with people, bringing out your phone to check a fact, to look up, details about something has already become a normal part of our thought process for most
Yep,
people, right? For almost
yep,
everyone. What's likely to happen is this sort of phenomenon is going to grow and extend beyond just Google searches or whatever it is. And
yep.
so, yeah, immersive
But I was
experiences will become normal.
what I was just trying to throw in there was that in Sweden, for
Yeah,
example, all right, that they're putting RFID devices in their skin so that when you turn up at work, you can log into work. When you're coming home, it's reading where you are. You're geolocated. It starts to switch to it's Internet of Things. So on and so forth. They're very experimental
yeah,
in the way that technologies are now part of your body.
yeah,
All right.
yeah,
Even now in healthcare, you're getting devices put in to monitor various organs in the body that automatically report back to your healthcare giver
yeah,
key indices with which emergencies can be defined or post-operative care can be done. You know,
yeah,
so um, I think that's a good point to wrap up on.
yeah,
I think that if we if we wrap it up, it's just saying I think that these three things: presence, flow, and immersive principles are something that for those of you listening, bear in mind when you're playing video games, or when you're looking at content, and see if they're present. You
yeah.
know, if you guys have got any questions, please, throw them at us. As always, please, it would really help us if you press like below and if you subscribe. And it's goodbye from Toby.
And we'll see you on the next one. Ciao.
Bye bye.